Hello and welcome. You are watching News 9 Live. I'm Krishna Kumar and we are putting the focus on a critical issue that may impact millions of users like you and me of telephone and mobile phone services across India. Once again, Bharat Sanchar Nigam Limited or BSNL, India's state-owned telecom company, is finding itself at the center of a data breach controversy. The alleged breach has potentially exposed a huge amount of sensitive user data, including SIM card details and home location records. The stolen data was even advertised for sale on underground platforms, including Telegram. The claim for the data leak emerged on the 27th of May, revealing that a hacker who goes by the moniker Kyber Phantom or KIBER-PHANT0M was offering unauthorized access to databases stolen from BSNL. Not just that, the hacker also claimed to possess databases of 14 other undisclosed Asian telecom organizations. The hacker invited Indian authorities to buy this data, suggesting that it could be sold to other parties if the authorities did not address the situation promptly. Now, there's a likelihood that this allegedly compromised data could be exploited by many malicious actors for a range of nefarious activities like SIM card cloning, identity theft, or financial fraud as well. Remember, many BSNL users rely on the service for both personal and professional communications. In response to the breach, BSNL is yet to issue a statement acknowledging the incident or even responding to it. Nonetheless, this latest incident has raised some serious concerns about data security and the measures that are in place to protect sensitive information. Now, if this data leak did happen, we are asking on the show, given this recurrent nature of data breaches, are there systemic vulnerabilities within BSNL's infrastructure? What can BSNL and other companies do to address critical security lapses, and what are the potential risks and consequences for customers like you and me in such situations? And to do that, we have some guests joining us on this bulletin. We have Mr. Kanish Gaur, CEO, India Future Foundation, former MD, Protivity, joining us. Thank you, Kanish, for being with us. We also have Dr. Shruti Mantri, Associate Director, ISB Institute of Data Science. We have Shri Parthasarathi, Partner Consulting and Leader, Digital Trust for Transformation for Viz Mazars, joining us. Thank you all of you for taking time out to be with us. Let me begin with Kanishk on this matter. Kanishk, talk to us. BSNL is no stranger to this kind of security and data breaches, but it's just happening way too often now, isn't it?
Yes. What BSNL requires is to put a proactive security monitoring system in place so they don't undergo these security breaches on a regular basis. Mind you, they are part of India's critical national infrastructure and undergo security audit by third parties. But such lapses can't be missed out when it comes to impacting national safety and security and implications like SIM cloning and sharing of personal identifiable information of Indian users. So there is a strong need of security monitoring systems to be deployed, also an independent investigation to be carried out by Government of India on why such lapses are happening at BSNL's end. In December 2023, we saw another such lapse which impacted millions of users of BSNL. And since BSNL is critical for the functioning of the Indian telecom infrastructure, it's important they take the right step forward and come out clean, stating what is the level of breach, how compromised are the users, and what they could do to prevent such breaches from happening going forward.
Okay, say this, Dr. Shruti Mantri, let me bring this to you. Now, this is not just about BSNL. I mean, this hacker apparently has data from other Asian telecom organizations as well. So, which means that it is not an isolated case. But the fact of the matter is that BSNL is a government entity that operates telecommunications in this country. So, all the more reason why we cannot keep having lapses into BSNL.
Yeah, absolutely. This is not just an attack on a data breach, but rather it is more an attack on the Indian critical infrastructure, that is the telecom, and one of the Indian critical infrastructure component, that is the telecom sector, because the breach not only threatens the privacy of millions of users, but it is also exposing the critical corporate and operational data systems of the telecom network, that is the BSNL, and it can have potentially crippling the BSNL has infrastructure, operations, reputation is at stake, but it can also have implication on the national security. So it is very, very important, to ensure that these kind of breaches do not happen. There needs to have an immediate action where a risk assessment needs to be done on the internal network of BSNL to ensure what are the vulnerabilities that currently exist, what vulnerabilities has led to this kind of an attack, because this hacker in fact has got access to the internal network of not just BSNL but the other telecom companies as well. So it's very, very important. And from the Indian perspective, I would say it's very important that a risk assessment needs to be done at the earliest. And BSNL and the Indian authorities also needs to come out and mention about the vulnerabilities that existed and what are the consequences that the Indian consumers are also going to face because of this data breach.
Right. Sri Parthasarathi, the question here is that BSNL is yet to even acknowledge this data breach or yet to come out with a statement about it.
Yes, I think it's important not only for them to acknowledge, but I think also put it out there as to what is the kind of data that is out there. I think if it was simple information related to people, personal information, I can understand that they're possibly taking time to capture a lot of this. But I think what we are really looking at is we are looking at information related to SIM details, IMSI details, HLR, and all of other information, which can be very, very critical because this critical infrastructure, this can impact government, this can impact public, because with all the things that you already talked about, SIM cloning and all things, it is not about just financial crime, right? It is about affecting our overall national security. And it's important for them to immediately acknowledge and start putting certain things, checks and balances in place. And anything that is leaked out there, for them to reach out to those particular users and inform them as to what is really happening. But even if they inform them, I don't believe the user will have too much control, because if there is any kind of cloning and any kind of attack, the user will be very vulnerable. So this is significant in terms of the kind of leak that is happening.
Right. Ganesh, do you think it's about time that the Department of Telecommunications of India steps into the matter because of these recurring security breaches at BSNL?
Absolutely, it's the time where Department of Telecom comes out with an advisory and a notification stating what has been done so far, what are going to be the likely implications for BSNL as per the Indian Telecom rules. And Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology could also step in because they have created the draft IT rules. As per the certain guidelines, these breaches need to be reported to the Control Agency Response Team in India, and they need to acknowledge that these breaches can be prevented going forward, and such serious lapses which not only impact national security and also the citizens' safety can be prevented going forward. This also puts India at a shame, I would say, because such serious lapses impacting again and again in a time where we are looking at data to be crucial for any kind of business we are doing.
Exactly. And Ganesh, BSNL already suffers from a poor subscriber base. And instances like this will further hurt its credibility and get lesser and lesser subscribers on its database.
Absolutely. So a lot of subscribers will move away from BSNL to other telecom service providers. Some of the other telecom service providers are investing heavily on security and also bundling security as part of their offerings to end customers. So at this point of juncture, this only impacts BSNL's average revenue per users, its brand, its credibility. So as a government-owned telecom infrastructure, which is part of national security, it's important they put the right mitigation steps in place.
Right, Dr. Shruti Mantri, in fact, they should have led the way when it comes to security and preventing data breaches and shown the way for private telecom operators. But the opposite is happening over here. You have the government-led company suffering the worst kind of security and data breaches, and you have private players already paving the way forward on how to protect their customers' data.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the government and the Department of Telecommunication really needs to come up with a framework that will ensure that the do's and the don'ts the telecom companies needs to follow. And when its own government organization is facing vulnerabilities, it's really we are putting the telecom sector at stake. And I really feel that it's a high time that the Department of Telecommunications steps in to ensure that there are guidelines and frameworks in place to ensure that there is an incident response plan in place. There should be measures to ensure that regulatory security audits are being followed by the telecom companies. What kind of advanced encryption techniques the companies are following to ensure that the customers or the consumers data is kept in a secured manner. It is also very, very important that they sensitize their own employees, and the staff is also aware. So there has to be certain frameworks and guidelines which the Department of Telecommunication needs to get in for all the telecom service providers.
Right. And also, Shri Parthasarathi, the fact of the matter is that all this hurts the profitability of BSNL. That's the business of a BSNL, which has already not been doing very well. This will make it weaker further.
I think I'd also like to comment on what Dr. Shruti talked about. I think a lot of these particular expectations in terms of compliance, cybersecurity, incident response are already mandated, and it needs to be already implemented by BSNL. I think right now it's more of after the fact where they need to really go ahead and make sure that they're doing this. But more importantly, I think a complete forensic review of all the data that has been leaked and to see how further exploitation of that particular data can be stopped and how it can be managed. And to that particular extent, I think that is going to be important. Second is, yes, it will impact BSNL and its traffic not only in India but also globally, because when you're really looking at a telecom provider and you're looking at the subscribers moving across, plus essentially with the kind of interlata connections and all things that happen with the international providers, most of those providers are going to essentially suspend or at least block some of the services that BSNL is providing to its subscribers. So there's going to be a major impact on that. Other than that, I think even locally, it will impact because people will now start thinking twice as to what they really need to do in terms of the service and the security. Because if BSNL is going through such repeated attacks and has not taken action on it, I think it's time that DOT steps in, puts some specific checks and balances, just like how the RBI as a regulator is doing it on banks and all things. Same way, I think DOT needs to step in and make sure that BSNL is following and is compliant. And if not, the services have to be shut down.
Right. And in fact, Ganesh, just 5 to 6 months ago in December, leaked the landline numbers of millions of BSNL users again. That was breached, and that data was also up for sale. And now you're back to this, and this includes your SIM card and your IMSI, international mobile subscriber identity, and home location records as well, HLRs as well. This is a dangerous breach that is also making us ask questions of how safe are India's telecom providers and their subscribers, not just BSNL but across the board.
No, it is. Today, cybercrime is the third largest economy in India and across the world as well, right? So one of the key issues is a lot of cyber frauds get perpetrated because of the use of fake SIM. So aspects like SIM cloning only get propagated forward by such breaches because it will be possible for fraudsters to create those fake SIMs and make those fraudulent calls from remote locations, and this will only get more cybercrime happening in the country. So what we need, such lapses can be stopped and companies like these get penalized. Unless they are not penalized, then it sets up a wrong precedent. Like she pointed out, RBI has been giving out serious fines to companies which have been non-compliant on data security. Similar norms needs to come out within the telecom setup right now. And if one company is penalized, I think the rest of the companies will take appropriate measures. And if it is to start with a government-owned telecom company, I think it's the right time that such action is taken. And it is made public so that the company is looking at these matters seriously, and there is certain level of assurance which is there for the end users who are still subscribing to BSNL services.
Right, Dr. Shruti Mantri, what we need to understand here at this stage is that who are at risk are mainly not the companies, but it's people like you and me and all those watching this broadcast. You know, we go out there, buy a SIM card, get a phone number, thinking that all is safe, and everything is on our phone these days. There is so many of our contacts are on this, or on these SIM cards, and our lives are on the phones and the mobile phone connections and the data connections that we have, and it's our lives that are at risk in that sense, Dr. Shruti Mantri. And in that sense, you need to have laws both in terms of how telecom service providers provide these services to us and have, you know, guardrails on that. And second of all, if there were to be a data breach, if there is a possibility of a security breach happening, what are the kind of security measures that one can have? Even that needs to be mandated.
Yeah, absolutely. See, it is eventually the consumers who are at loss. Even to get a basic SIM card today, as rightly you mentioned that, you know, we need mobile is an essential services today, and that gives us, in fact, the route to other essential services, whether it's the banking and financial, the health services that we require. But basic is to get in that services, you require a SIM card. And to procure a SIM card, we rather use a proof of identity and proof of address, and we give our confidential, sensitive information. According to a study that was done by us, that is the Indian School of Business, we have been able to identify that 90% of people rather prefer our personal, the national identification number, that is the Aadhaar card, in fact, as a proof of identity and a proof of address. And when such kind of data leak happens, it is in fact our proof of identity and confidential information that is available in open. And the cyber criminals will basically use this particular information to open more mule accounts, which are then will be used for carrying out fraudulent transactions. This can also be used to issue, fraudulent SIM subscriptions, and those SIM cards will then be used by these cyber criminals to carry more attack. And we as consumers, in fact, will not even be aware where our confidential information is being used. That is the reason it is very, very important that we have laws where, you know, we can secure and ensure that the consumer sensitive information is being secured. And even in case of this data breach, if it happens, it is very, very important that companies and organizations needs to come forward and tell to their clients and consumers what the do's and the don'ts they need to do in case of such data breaches.
Sri Parthasarathi, I mean, this is really a wake-up call, not just for BSNL, but the whole of India's telecom industry, which is now becoming, you know, all about three private players and one government player. You have only a Bharti Airtel, Vodafone Idea, and Reliance Jio Infocom at the end of the day, and it's fast becoming a duopoly if that's possible. We're trying to keep it about three private players, but the fact of the matter is that now BSNL, at least it comes under government's control. But how do you make sure that there's uniformity in terms of, the security measures undertaken by India's telecom providers and also the risks that they're exposed to at a time when cyber security is one of the biggest issues facing them?
I think one of the things that I'd like to say is having worked very closely with telecom players and doing cybersecurity work with them, I think they definitely do. I'm not giving them a clean check, but I would say that their particular mechanisms and cyber security programs are much, much more robust. And just because it's BSNL, it's government, we can't basically give it an easy way to get away with something like this. So I think it's important, as I said before, that for the government to basically step in and put in the right set of controls in place. And if BSNL can shape up, then fantastic. And I agree that essentially we should not be moving to a duopoly and all thing, and it only affects consumers. So we should ensure that they get their act together and put things in the proper place. That is one. Second is essentially this is not going to only affect end consumers. If I were to put myself in the hacker's shoes, I would be going after much more sensitive information. A lot of the government and a lot of the departments are running on BSNL. I would attack that, or I would go with advanced persistent threats to basically impact their infrastructure in the near term or long term, or actually have spyware and other thing implemented on their particular system. Second, I would look at high-profile people in the country who essentially are using BSNL and look at what I can do there. And third is I would also use social engineering techniques and helping using their particular SIM cards and cloning and other information and do a lot of those particular things. So the impact can be far-reaching, and which is why I think it's important to one is do a complete cybersecurity review. Second is look at all of the lapses that have been there and to make sure that whether it's in the past or today, to make sure that you are putting the right controls, checks, and other stuff in place. Third is essentially to have a monitor to monitor BSNL until they get that act together and until they can actually get things right. And fourth is protect not only the country but the end consumers and put the right checks and balances there. But immediate action that is required is for whatever has been leaked there to make sure that those people are reached out to and they are warned and they know what the threat that is looming on their.
Kanish, all I can ask at this stage is that this particular hacker had put this data up for sale for $5,000. For $5,000 is what this data that he or she got from BSNL was put up for sale. How do you control the dark web? You know, it's virtually impossible.
You cannot control the dark web, and if such critical data is being up for sale for $5,000, then multiple players, the sophisticated groups, the state-sponsored activists will buy this data and try and use techniques for compromising India's critical infrastructure, which will create more security lapses for other critical infrastructure entities, which could be from banking, which could be from financial services, which could be from oil and gas, nuclear power plants. So it puts national safety and security at huge amount of risk. What is required is that if there is government-owned critical infrastructure, there are additional controls put in place to safeguard the entities which government owns, because it will have direct implications on India's GDP. $5,000 worth of critical infrastructure data can expose India to $1 billion worth of cybercrime and reputational damage. So this puts India at the back door while we are trying to showcase ourselves as the leader of Global South, hosting G20, talking about digital public infrastructure. The digital public infrastructure becomes at risk because of such failures which are happening in India. Hence, security must be made paramount for government bodies, which are the backbone for securing our digital public infrastructure and critical infrastructure. So, right time, we take some appropriate actions right now and ensure such fallouts don't happen again.
Dr. Shruti Mantri, I'm going to take a quick comment from you before we wrap things up. Right now, you have instances like this happening, and thankfully this data has not been sold. Hopefully it's not been sold and it hasn't gotten into the wrong hands. But we're not far away from that day, are we?
Not at all. In fact, see, today he's posting it openly on the dark web. He's inviting, people to purchase that particular data. He's invited the Indian authorities also to purchase that data. I think this is like a ransom holding the Indian authorities to purchase our own data. It's high time that the Indian authorities, intervene and ensure that we do not fall in this particular situation, because this are going to have severe implications on the nation's security. Because this person has access, not just has access to the encryption keys, he has access to our national identity information, he has access to the telecom company's proprietary softwares. He now knows what are the vulnerabilities into our telecom, softwares which are being used. So the damage is going to be massive.
Right. This is laid bare the humongous threat facing us, all of us, so you, me, all those who are watching, and it's time that the authorities wake up. It's time that the Indian government wakes up. For now, we're going to wrap things up. We're completely out of time over here. Thank you, Dr. Shruti Mantri, Associate Director at ISB Institute of Data Science, for joining us. Thank you, Kanish Gaur, CEO, India Future Foundation, former MD Productivity, for joining us. And of course, Sri Parthasarathi, Partner, Consulting and Lead at Digital Trust and Transformation for Vizmazars, for being with us on this broadcast. And with that, it's a wrap here from my side. Thank you so much for watching. This is Krishna Kumar signing off.
confidence is certainly back in the market.
Do tighten your seat belt so that you can withstand volatility.